Kids at a young age are all subconscious. They really have very little. Your conscious mind acts as the filter for the ideas that get through to your subconscious mind. And any idea that gets through to your subconscious mind enough times will become impressed in your subconscious mind, and then you will express it through your body. It becomes a habit. They will do what you do. They won't do what you say. If you don't like something about your kid, you don't like the way they treat somebody, you don't like the way they act in certain situations, you don't like this or that, there's only one place you need to look. It's in whatever is the closest mirror you can find. Freedom doesn't happen by accident. It's built. Welcome to Freedom by Design, where we explore what it really takes to create more freedom in your life, your business, and your relationships. We're Josh and Paula Kerpan, and this is intentional living done right.
Hi, welcome back again to Freedom by Design with Josh and Paula Kerpan. We today are going to be talking about parenting. So for all of you parents out there, this is the episode for you. I actually had a lot of people message me and ask about this in my DMs on Instagram. So I thought we would do a little episode on helping kids develop healthy habits and kind of raising our kids from the inside out. So our kids are being programmed every day, just as we are, right? So we talked about environment in a previous episode and how important that is. And, you know, all of those sensory factors that are taking information from our environment and putting it into our minds. And with our kids, I've had a lot of conversations with other parents about, you know, the difficulty of controlling those types of environments that they're in and the information that they're getting, and then therefore leading to habits that they're building. So I wanted to have this conversation with Josh today because I think it'll be incredibly valuable for all the parents out there that are maybe, you know, struggling with their kids developing good habits and instilling that programming kind of inside of them. So we're not talking about like controlling our kids. That hasn't really ever seemed to work too much for me, but our kids are being programmed and are picking up habits and information every single day. So we just want to try and help them build good habits and a good foundation so that as they grow through life, they have a good, you know, foundation and base to work from. So Josh, I want to ask you about habits first and foremost. So with kids, they are being influenced by somebody at all times, right? And so as parents, our job is to help them kind of navigate all of that information and build good, strong habits. What would you say would be the best way for our kids to form good habits at an early age?
For their parents to have good habits. That's it. There's no other way to do it because you can tell them to do whatever you want. You can say you should do this till you're blue in the face. They're going to do what you do, not what you say. So model good habits. Model the habits that you want your kids to have. They will pick up your habits. Now, if they don't spend much time around you, they're going to pick up the habits from whatever environment they're in. Okay. So if they spend most of their time at school, they're going to pick up the habits of the other kids and the teachers and not you. Or if you are in a shared parenting situation, they're going to pick up less of your habits than they would if you're cohabiting consistently with them, right? So they're going to pick up the habits from whatever environment they're in. If you want them to pick up good habits, get them in a good environment. Okay. If they are around you a lot, you create the environment. You need to have the good habits. Okay? You can't tell them to do something and then not show them. They will do what you do. They won't do what you say. You can, I suppose, coerce them into doing what you say sometimes, but long term, that's not going to work. It's not going to work. They're going to do what you do, and whether you like that or not. And if you don't like something about your kids, you don't like the way they treat somebody, you don't like the way they act in certain situations, you don't like this or that, there's only one place you need to look. It's in whatever is the closest mirror you can find. That's it. So if you don't like something about them, look in the mirror and change that in yourself. This is generally good rule of thumb for most people. That you don't like something about, you'll see in others what you don't like or you do like about yourself. But your kids, it's particularly true because they are a mirror version of you, because they are spending all their time or a lot of their time with you and picking up all of your habits. So if you want to instill good habits in them, identify the habits that you want those to be and exhibit them yourself.
I think that's so great, and you hit it right on the nail on the head right off the hop, that it comes back and reflects on your habits and what you do to take care of yourself, and how you value yourself and speak to yourself, right, is what the kids are going to pick up on. But when kids, I find a lot of times people are like, well, I want my kids to figure it out for themselves. I want them to grow into whoever they want to be, or figure themselves out, or those sorts of terms where you throw it around. But really, I think that we need to be intentional about, the information and the habits and the beliefs and values that they're around in their environment and that they're seeing, and not just letting that stuff happen by accident, right? Which is why you and I are very intentional about where our kids are, right? Like the activities that they do, the groups that they're part of, the environments that they're in, because we can have a little bit of say in who they spend their time around, which in that environment episode that we recorded recently, I mean, the environment is everything, right? And so who they're around and the people that they're spending their most time with is where they're going to get that information that's going to form these habits and beliefs. So I want you to kind of explain to our listeners, and all the parents out there, how the mind works. And in kids, in younger childhood form, we have our conscious mind and our subconscious mind in everybody's mind. And with kids, I want you to kind of explain how that works, and in terms of us parenting them, how we need to kind of know how the mind works to be able to do that effectively.
Okay. So your kids are going to find themselves. They're going to find out who they are, and they're going to build themselves. And that's going to be 100% correlated to the environment they're in. They're going to find themselves wherever their feet are planted. So if you want them to, like, there is no them out there that they're going to look for. They are inside, and they are going to become a product of whatever environment they're in. So you don't have to send them off. If you're going to send them to university to find themselves, well, they're going to become whatever the typical university student is. That's the deal, right? They don't exist somewhere outside of themselves. But so your kids, all people, will have an initial operating system. Okay. And that is not consciously designed. That is just inherited through your environment, through the people and the things and everything around you. When you're that's stored, that's your set of habits and ideas that create all of the actions that you take. That is stored in your subconscious mind. And when you're a child, your subconscious mind is wide open to the world. Okay. You have this two parts of your mind, the subconscious mind and the conscious mind. The conscious mind is the part that we're very much more aware of. It's where our reasoning faculties are, like our intellectual faculties. It's kind of what we use. We're conscious of using to reason through things, to sort through things. So when an idea comes into your mind as an adult, if you are relatively high level of awareness, you recognize that idea. You can reason with it, think, do I like this idea? Does it fit with who I want to be? Does it fit with the things I want to have? And then you can accept that idea or reject it. Okay. If you're presented with that idea enough times, at some point you won't be able to reject it, but that's a different talk for a different episode. Kids do not have that reasoning faculty developed yet. Okay. They're still developing their conscious faculties, their ability to think through and really process through information like we can as adults. Now, most adults don't leverage that nearly as much as they should, but kids just don't have it. It's not, at a very young age, it's not developed at all. And then they get to, I want to say it's somewhere in the neighborhood of like 7 years old or so, then they really start questioning some things a little bit more. And you'll notice it in your kids. Some will start questioning earlier, some later. But when they start questioning things, that is their reasoning faculty being developed. And what do we as parents do when your kids ask you why? Because I said so. We shut down the reasoning faculty. We're not trying to help them develop the reasoning faculty, which is a really great faculty, a really great tool to develop, because it's going to allow us to take all these new ideas that we're going to come across us in life and decide if we want to accept them or reject them. Now, kids at a young age are all subconscious. They really have very little. Your conscious mind acts as the filter for the ideas that get through to your subconscious mind. And any idea that gets through to your subconscious mind enough times will become impressed in your subconscious mind, and then you will express it through your body. It becomes a habit. Okay. If kids at a young age don't have that conscious ability to filter out any of those ideas, so all of the ideas from the environment around them just get right down into the subconscious and form that initial operating system. Okay. So that's why so much of therapy and finding out why people do the way things that they do goes back to early childhood, to these memories that we don't even remember,
Yeah.
but they have such an incredibly profound impact on us for the rest of our lives, because they're literally forming the ideas of how we think the world works. Okay. So when you are in charge of creating your kid's initial operating system. A big strategy for me is part of my kids' initial operating system is to question everything, is to be inquisitive and open-minded, so that when they get older and develop their reasoning faculties, they will be able to take everything that comes into their mind and decide consciously whether they want to accept it or reject it, versus just sort of willy-nilly wheeling through it in life. But that takes time for that conscious faculty to develop. Okay. And there's some debate on how long it takes till it's probably never fully developed. You can always develop it, right? But till it's very useful, there's some debate on that. I imagine it depends largely on the kids, but you want to try and develop those conscious faculties as well. And that will allow your kids then to go and make decisions for themselves that align with what they want, as opposed to just mirroring who you are. But initially, they are going to mirror who you are. That's it. That you will form their initial operating system. And part of that, hopefully, is the ability for them to then go and question why do you do the things you do? Right. So they can be, well, I don't like this. It's not what I want to do. And then they can choose on their own to be whoever they want to be when they decide what they want.
So when kids are little, or you're parenting them in any sort of chaotic type of situation, and maybe you want to lecture them or reason with them, does that work? Like when you kind of get down to their level and you want to sort of reason through something when their lid is flipped. I feel like we've talked about the flipped lid, but you can maybe touch on that in terms of the conscious and subconscious as well. But does reasoning and kind of lecturing your kids work versus having them mirror what you do and see that repetitive habit forming?
Yeah, so that's two different questions. You put reasoning and lecturing in the same bucket, and they're completely different. Okay, reasoning is the process of asking questions. Lecturing is just me to you. It's a monologue, right? So most parents that think that they're reasoning with their kids, they'll ask them a question, and then because kids have to think through it, and it takes them a long time to think through it because they don't have this conscious ability to think through that question. They won't wait. Parents don't have patience. They're not going to wait for the answer. They're going to tell them what they think. Right? So you think you're reasoning with them. You're not. You're just telling them your opinion, which fits largely with, a lot of our education system today. It doesn't teach kids necessarily to think and challenge the way things are. It's just memorize, this is the way that things have been, so it's the way that you're going to do things going in the future. But if you want to teach your kids to reason, you want to reason with your kids, ask a question and then don't say another word until they answer. And you will help them develop their reasoning faculty with that. But if you're just lecturing your kids, all you're doing is impressing it into their subconscious, which is fine. If that's, you be aware that is, you are creating their operating system with that. You're half the time you're going to be doing it out of anger, because it's in those situations, that's the kind of state that you're in. But absolutely, it at a young age, even at a young age, they can always answer questions. It just takes longer. So yeah, you can reason with your kids at a very young age if you have the patience to wait for the answer.
Yeah, one thing, our kids are never allowed to say, I don't know. They always have to come up with some sort of a response. And it is a lesson of patience to wait sometimes until they actually have formulated their response. But we want them to think about what it is that they're going to say and be able to explain why they said it, and it definitely takes practice for them. Like you said, they're still developing those faculties. So it's not like it comes right off the hop. And also too, I know with our oldest, we had to kind of have him rethink about what he was saying, because he would often answer as to what we wanted to hear, or what he thought we wanted him to say versus what his actual opinion was, right? And so it's just giving them the space and time to be able to express themselves and think through their thoughts, which, like you said, is just going to help them. And the stronger those faculties are moving forward, the better their decision making is going to be.
I wonder with him if it's not because he spent some time going to school. Like, we homeschool most of our kids now, and in school,
maybe you
give the right answer or the wrong answer. At least that was my experience. There wasn't, there was a right answer that the teacher's looking for on the exam or whatever. And so you go to school, that's the paradigm. That's an environment that you're in. So that's the paradigm that is formed, that there is right and wrong answers to every question. And to some degree, that's true. And to some degree, it certainly isn't true. Most questions can be answered with another question. And that's the process of reasoning. And that's why it takes so long for kids to answer a question is they'll come up with an initial answer and then they'll recognize that that's not exactly right. So they're asking another question, but they're doing it all internally. I urge my kids to just do that externally. Answer the question as fast as you can. Give me your first answer. And then we're just going to ask that whatever question needs to be asked next to get closer to the truth, closer to the answer we're looking for. But that's the process of reasoning. And that's when I'm reasoning inside my mind, I'm just asking one question after another. And that's how I teach reasoning, is to give me your first answer. And then let's talk about if that fits. If it doesn't fit, then what's the next question that we're going to ask to try and get closer to the real answer.
Right. It's really about flipping the question asking. So the parents asking the questions versus the kids asking them, right? Like the kids are just always being like, why is this? And why do we do that? And why is that? Whereas we want to be the ones, when they say their response, that we want to be the ones that are triggering those questions so that they have to think more, right? To have more of a complex answer.
Yeah. So I'll tell them, if they ask why I do something, I'll tell them, this is why I do something. Well, what do you think about that? Do you think that's right? Or would there be a better way to do things? And it leads to some pretty cool conversations. But Madison in particular, like, she gets really frustrated because every time she asks me a question, I just answer back with a question. She's like, oh, why can't you just answer me? Why does everything have to be one of these life lessons? Is her thing. And she has taken that pretty far at times. But so it can be frustrating because it's frustrating. We're just all looking for easy answers. Well, you have all the answers. We all have all the answers within us. It's just all about asking the right questions.
Sometimes I do have to look up when the questions are about like an animal randomly or something, and I actually don't know the answer to it, but you could always find the answer when kids ask you weird questions.
They don't know that you don't know the answer.
Yeah, that's true.
Just give an answer and sound confident.
So I want to talk about habits, like instilling and building habits in kids. And like you said, it kind of reflects back on us and our habits that we have formed. But what are some really important, like cornerstone habits that we can teach our kids and kind of also develop ourselves so that we're mimicking and modeling those for our kids? That would be like, the starter set of habits that you would recommend that people work on with their kids.
Just one, to think well. That's it. If you do that, that will lead you to creating all the other habits you want to do. Like, ultimately, that's all I'm trying to teach our kids to do, is to think. Because I want them to think for themselves. I don't want them to be limited to my paradigm and all the things that I can teach them about what I know. I want them to be able to take that and question all of it and then go and find their own truths about everything and take it the next step, right? So I don't want them to be miniature versions of me for any longer than they have to be. I want them to find themselves, or build themselves, not find themselves, right? I want them to build themselves intentionally based on what they want, but I want them to do it themselves, but do that by giving them the skill of being able to think. So thinking well is the only habit that really is necessary. If you can think well, that will lead you to building all the other habits you need, or identifying all the other habits that you need. But if you want to get into specific habits that have been important to me that I wasn't exhibiting, that I told them about but wasn't exhibiting, like one was working out. So I remember telling Casey, he was playing baseball, like practicing his baseball, loves practicing baseball, loves anything to do with baseball. I said, sometime you're going to have to, work out and do things that aren't baseball related. It's not going to be nearly as fun. You're going to have to kind of fall in love with that process if you want to, follow your dreams and do the things that you want to do. And it struck me that, boom, here I was telling him he should do this. I know I should get in better shape. Why not? What 40-year-old shouldn't? So I was like, I got to show him what it looks like to do that. So that's what I did. I built the habit of being physically taking care of myself really well physically. And now that we're instilling that in our kids, and they go out and work out themselves, and that will be a lifelong habit, which will serve them incredibly well.
Yeah, I think too, it's just about modeling things for our kids to pick up, like we talked about at the start, and creating that environment where they're going to see us, pursuing and keeping promises to ourselves and keeping those habits. And then, like by osmosis, because they're in that environment, they pick up on that stuff, right? So it's things like gratitude and finding the gratefulness and the wins in the day every single day. It's about keeping promises to yourself, following through with things that you say you're going to do, and doing that kind of working together as a team within the family. Because I think if you can model those behaviors as a family together and see multiple people doing all of those things, it's just about that accountability and being that environment, right? You're going to want to follow through on those habits every single day if everybody else is too, right? And you can kind of visualize that happening with every single person in your family or whatever environment that you're in, which I think is a lot of people will feel a lot of pressure for that because they think that they need to be perfect as parents. And that is simply not the case. But you need to be consistent and keep promises to yourself every single day. And if you do that, your kids also pick up on that, right? And they're going to see you do that every single day and kind of go back to keeping promises to yourself and follow through and all of those things. And they're going to pick up on that and do that themselves because they see it, right? It's not what you're saying to them to do.
Well,
it's what
we talk a lot about
showing them.
self-image in our program and developing the image of the person that you want to be, to get the things you want to have. Well, I think rarely do people do that for themselves, but oftentimes you might do that for your kids. This is the type of person I'd like my kid to be. I want my kids to be a good person, right? And maybe they do these types of things, et cetera, et cetera. We're able to design that character. Well, that's really interesting. And I think you should do that. Who do you want your kids to be as a 14-year-old or a 20-year-old or whatever it is? And then you model that. That's it. Whatever you want your kids to become, you have to model that. You don't teach them, you don't tell them, you show them. It's that simple.
Well, that's too. I was going to ask you, do you think that your inner work, personal development is separate from parenting, or is it the parenting? Is it actually parenting?
It is the parenting. You are the leader. That's what I'm saying is you can say all you want. You can read all the parenting books and get all the tips and tricks, and you can say whatever you want to your kids. It doesn't matter. What you model is what they will pick up. That is what they will become.
Which I actually think is great because it makes it so simple, right? It's really super simple. It's taking care of yourself, and that is parenting.
If you're willing to take responsibility, then it's pretty simple.
And that's the thing about investing into yourself is in turn investing into your kids. So a lot of times when I talk to people in my Empower Her program, they're like, as moms, they feel guilty about taking the time to take care of themselves. Like, well, by you taking care of yourself, you are in turn going to be able to invest and take care of your kids in a far better way than you would if you are not taking care of yourself, right?
If you've been listening to this podcast, you already know something. You're built for more. The 100X Breakthrough Program is built for leaders, business owners, and growth-driven individuals who are ready to stop playing at the edge of their potential and start operating at a completely different level. If you know you're capable of more, but you're still stuck, this is your next step. Let's schedule an instant impact coaching session and see if the 100X Breakthrough Program is the right fit for you. Go to kznsolutions.ca. That's kznsolutions.ca.
Yeah, so let's do a call to action takeaway. What can people work on this week that will help them move towards a happier household, better, more confident parenting?
Go right now. Maybe you're driving in a car and you've got your rear view mirror there, or maybe you're in your house. You can go to your bathroom and look in the mirror and see what you see. And if that's what you want your kids to turn into, then you're doing a good job. If there's changes that you want to make, then make them in yourself, and your kids will model that. Okay. Now, at some point in time, your kids are going to make all their own decisions, but it'll all be based on the environment that they're in now and then. So, you're in charge of a lot of that. So it's a lot of responsibility. That's the only time, in your existence where you're actually responsible for the outcomes of another human being's life. Right. But at some point in time, you're going to hand the reins over to them. You want to make sure that they're prepared to take the reins over at that point in time. We talk a lot about parenting kids and raising kids and having great kids. My kids are just miniature human beings. I'm not raising them to be great kids. I'm raising them to be great adults, great humans, right? They just happen to be kids for a little while. It's part of the process. But yeah, have a look in the mirror, and if you like what you see, then you're probably doing a pretty good job, and your kids will turn out all right. If you don't, then make the changes that you need to make. And you don't necessarily, I guess, have to look in a mirror. You could look at your kids because they're like a mirror. So if you don't like what you see there, what is it in you that's producing those results, or what is it in their environment where you may need to remove them from something, right? They might not be picking up, certainly they're not picking up all their bad habits from you if they're not spending all their time around you. So where are they picking them up from? And what can you do about that environment? You can tell them you shouldn't do what Johnny does at school. That's not good. Doesn't matter. He's in the environment. He's going to do what Johnny does. No offense, Johnny, if you're listening to this, but that's just the reality of it. You can tell him whatever you want, that this is a bad habit. Doesn't matter. He wants to fit in. He's in that environment. That's what they're going to do. So do an environment audit for your kids. If you don't like some of the habits that you're seeing, where are they picking that up, and what can you do about it to eliminate that from their environment?
Yeah, I think it was Dan Martell that said that he chooses all of his activities for his kids because he wants to have some control over the environment that they're in. Because if you let kids kind of choose whatever it is that they want, they might end up somewhere where, they're having that kind of influence from their external environment that isn't positive for them, right? Which I thought that was so great of him to say that, because I think that's a lot of people wouldn't do that, right? Like they want their kids to have the choice and they want their kids to kind of do their own thing and be their own person. And I think it is really crucially important that we're intentional about the habits and the goals that we have and we set, and that our kids can kind of model in that environment and kind of set them up, like you said, with a foundation, so that as they grow into great human beings that are contributing to the world, which is our goal, that they have that good foundation to start off of, because once they leave, they can build off of that. Awesome conversation. I feel like people get so much value out of that. So thank you so much for the parenting wisdom today.
You bet. Thanks for joining. We'll talk to you next time.
We appreciate you being part of Freedom by Design. If this conversation added value, help us spread the love. Take a second to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs it. The more intentional we become, the more freedom we create in our homes, our work, and our future. We'll see you next time. God bless.